everyone, welcome back to our chapter book read-along of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief. It is by Rick Riordan, and we are reading the illustrated copy, which is illustrated by John Rocco. So, this is an exciting story, and we're just barely halfway into it. But what I want you to do is, if you are watching this with someone, pause the video and discuss some of the things you remember that we have heard about so far. Maybe who is Percy Jackson's Greek god parent? What are some of the friends he's met at camp? And what has been your favorite thing that has happened so far in the story? Then goes my quick 1 sentence per chapter review. Let's see if I can do it again. Chapter 1. Percy Jackson is our main character. On a school field trip, he gets into trouble by his teacher, Mrs. Dodds. Turns out, though, his teacher is a monster. She grows huge talons. Her eyes glow. She has giant wings. His other teacher, Mr. Brunner, tosses him a sword, and he defeats Mrs. Dodds. Percy and his good friend Grover are done with school and head back to New York City. On their way back, they see 3 old ladies knitting giant socks, and they snip a very large yarn. We meet Percy's mom, Sally. She is an awesome person, and her not-so-great husband named Gabe, or as Percy calls him, Smelly Gabe. Percy and his mom go to their favorite place, a cabin on the beach, but Grover finds them and says they're in trouble. Also, turns out Grover's not human. He's a satyr, which means he has goat legs. Percy, his mother, and Grover all race in Gabe's car to Camp Half-Blood. They are pursued by the Minotaur, which is a half-bull, half-man monster. It chases them down, grabs Percy's mom, and she disappears into gold dust. But Percy defeats him. We go into Camp Half-Blood. Turns out Percy's teacher, Mr. Brunner, is actually a centaur, which is top half of a man, back half of a horse. And his name is Kyrian. He is the activities director for Camp Half-Blood. The director is the god of wine named Dionysus. Chapters 6 and 7, we learn all about Camp Half-Blood. The campers there are demigods, which means one parent is a Greek god and one parent is a mortal human. So they are heroes. Some of them have special powers or things that they're really, really good at. Percy also meets a couple friends, Annabeth, whose mother is Athena, and Luke, whose father is Hermes. Percy is staying in the Hermes cabin until his godly parent claims him. So it's a little crowded in there because there's a lot of non-claimed campers. He also meets someone who's not quite a friend. Her name is Clarice, and she is the daughter of Ares, god of war. In Chapter 8, they play Capture the Flag, and during the game, the Ares cabin tries to get back at Percy for making fools of them earlier. And Percy defeats them, and then is claimed by his father, Poseidon, the god of the sea. In Chapter 9, Percy is given a quest. He is supposed to go with Annabeth and Grover to the underworld, which is kind of like where all the souls go when humans die in this world. And he is supposed to retrieve Zeus's master bolt from Hades, who they think stole it, and bring it back in 10 days to New York City. Oh boy. In Chapter 10, Percy, Annabeth, and Grover start their quest. They are dropped off in New York City and hop on a Greyhound bus. Sad thing is, the last passengers also on their bus were Mrs. Dodds and her sisters, the Furies. They are the worst of the worst monsters sent to find Percy and Annabeth and Grover and stop them from completing their quest. Well, they attack them, and then the whole bus gets exploded by a giant lightning bolt. So Percy ruins a perfectly good bus, and Percy, Annabeth, and Grover have to run off into the woods and hopefully have gotten away from those monsters. They have no ride, no money. Oh boy, this adventure did not start off very well. So we are about to see exactly what happens next in their quest. So let's see our next chapter of The Lightning Thief. Chapter 11. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. In a way, it's nice to know there are Greek gods out there, because you have somebody to blame when things go wrong. For instance, when you're walking away from a bus that's been attacked by a monster hags and blown up by lightning, and it's raining on top of everything else, most people might think that that's just really bad luck. When you're a half-blood, you understand that some divine forces really are trying to mess up your day. So, there we were, Annabeth, Grover, and I, walking through the woods along the New Jersey riverbank, the glow of New York City making the night sky yellow behind us, and the smell of the Hudson reeking in our noses. Grover was shivering and braying, his big goat eyes turned slit-pupiled and full of terror. 3 kindly ones! All 3 at once! I was pretty much in shock myself. The explosion of the bus windows still rang in my ears, but Annabeth kept pulling us along, saying, "Come on! The further we get away, the better!" "All our money is back there," I reminded her. "Our food and clothes, everything." "Well, maybe if you hadn't decided to jump into the fight." "What did you want me to do? Let you get killed?" "I don't need you to protect me, Percy. I would have been fine." "Sliced like sandwich bread," Grover put in. "But fine." "Shut up, goat boy," said Annabeth. Grover brayed mournfully. "Tin cans. A perfectly good bag of tin cans." We sloshed across mossy ground, through nasty twisted trees that smelled like sour laundry. After a few minutes, Annabeth fell into line next to me. "Look, her voice faltered. "I appreciate your coming back for us, okay? That was really brave." "We're a team, right?" She was silent for a few more steps. "It's just that if you died, aside from the fact that would really suck for you, it would mean the quest was over. This may be my only chance to see the real world." The thunderstorm had finally let up. The city glow faded behind us, leaving us in almost total darkness. I couldn't see anything of Annabeth except a glint of her blonde hair. "You haven't left Camp Half-Blood since you were 7?" I asked her. "No, only short field trips. My dad..." "The history professor?" "Yeah, it didn't work out for me living at home. I mean, Camp Half-Blood is my home." She was rushing her words right now, as if she were afraid somebody might try to stop her. "At camp, you train, and that's all cool and everything, but the real world is where the monsters are. That's where you learn whether you're getting good or not." If I didn't know better, I could have sworn I heard doubt in her voice. "You're pretty good with that knife," I said. "You think so?" "Anybody who can piggyback ride a Fury is okay by me." I couldn't really see, but I thought she might have smiled. "You know," she said, "maybe I should tell you. Something funny back on the bus." Whatever she wanted to say was interrupted by a shrill toot toot toot, the sound of an owl being tortured. "Hey, my reed pipes still work," Grover cried. "If I could just remember a Find a Path song, we could get out of these woods." He puffed out a few notes, but the tune still sounded suspiciously like Hilary Duff. Instead of finding a path, I immediately slammed into a tree and got a nice-sized knot on my head. Add that to the list of superpowers I did not have. Infrared vision. After tripping and cursing and generally feeling miserable for another half-mile or so, I started to see light up ahead. The colors of a neon sign. I could smell food. Fried, greasy, excellent food. And I'd realized I hadn't eaten anything unhealthy since I'd arrived at Half-Blood Hill. where they lived on grapes, bread, cheese, and extra lean cunt nymph-prepared barbecue. This boy needed a double cheeseburger. We kept walking until I saw a deserted 2-lane road through the trees. On the other side was a closed-down gas station, a tattered billboard for a 1990s movie, and one open business, which was the source of the neon light and the good smell. It wasn't a fast food restaurant like I'd hoped. It was one of those weird roadside curio shops that sell lawn flamingos and wooden Indians and cement grizzly bears and stuff like that. The main building was a long, low warehouse, surrounded by acres of sanctuary. The neon sign above the gate was impossible for me to read, because if there's anything worse for my dyslexia than regular English, it's red, cursive, neon English. To me, it looked like Antiumesgrammen. What the heck does it say? I asked. I don't know, Annabeth said. She loved reading so much I'd forgotten she was dyslexic too. Grover translated. Auntie M's Garden Gnome Emporium. Flanking the entrance, as advertised, were 2 cement garden gnomes, ugly bearded little runts smiling and waving, as if they were about to get their picture taken. I crossed the street, following the smell of hamburgers. Hey, Grover warned. The lights are on inside, Annabeth said. Maybe it's open. Snack bar, I said wistfully. Snack bar, she agreed. Are you too crazy? Grover said. This place is weird. We ignored him. The front lot was a forest of statues, cement animals, cement children, even cement satyrs playing the pipes, which gave Grover the creeps. Ah, he bleated. Looks like my Uncle Ferdinand. We stopped at the warehouse door. Don't knock, Grover pleaded. I smell monsters. Your nose is clogged up from the Furies, Annabeth told him. All I smell is burgers. Aren't you hungry? Meat, he said scornfully. I'm a vegetarian. You eat cheese enchiladas and aluminum cans, I reminded him. Those are vegetables. Come on, let's leave. These statues are looking at me. Then the door creaked open, and standing in front of us was a tall Middle Eastern woman. At least, I assumed she was Middle Eastern, because she wore a long black gown that covered everything but her hands, and her head was completely veiled. Her eyes glinted behind a curtain of black gauze, but that was about all I could make out. Her coffee-colored hands looked old, but well manicured and elegant, so I imagined she was a grandmother who had once been a beautiful lady. Her accent sounded vaguely Middle Eastern, too. She said, Children, it is too late for you to be out all alone. Where are your parents? They're, Annabeth started to say. We're orphans, I said. Orphans, she said. The word sounded alien in her mouth. But my dear, surely not. We had separated from our caravan, I said. Our circus caravan. The ringmaster told us to meet him at a gas station if we got lost, but he may have forgotten, or maybe he meant a different gas station. Anyway, we're lost. Is that food I smell? Oh, my dears, the woman said. You must come in. Poor children. I am Auntie M. Go straight through to the back of the warehouse, please. There's a dining area. Annabeth muttered to me, Circus caravan? Always have a strategy, right? Your head is full of kelp. The warehouse was filled with more statues, people in all different poses, wearing all different outfits, and with different expressions on their faces. I was thinking you'd have to have a pretty huge garden to fit one of these statues, because they were all life-size. But mostly, I was thinking about food. Go ahead, call me an idiot for walking into a strange lady's shop, like that, just because I was hungry. But I do impulsive stuff sometimes. Plus, you've never smelled Auntie M's hamburgers. The aroma was like laughing gas at the dentist's chair. It made everything else go away. I barely noticed Grover's nervous whimpers, or the way the statue's eyes seemed to follow me, or the fact that Auntie M had locked the door behind us. All I cared about was finding the dining area, and sure enough, there it was, at the back of the warehouse, a fast food counter with a grill, a soda fountain, a pretzel heater, and nacho cheese dispenser. Everything you could want, plus a few steel picnic tables out front. "Please sit down," Auntie Em said. "Awesome," I said. Grover said reluctantly, "we don't have any money, ma'am." Before I could jab him in the ribs, Auntie Em said, No, children. No money. This is a special case, yes? It is my treat for such nice orphans." "Thank you, ma'am," Annabeth said. Auntie Em stiffened, as if Annabeth had done something wrong. But then the old lady relaxed just as quickly, so I figured it must have been my imagination. "Quite all right, Annabeth," she said. "You have such beautiful gray eyes, child." Only later did I wonder how she knew Annabeth's name, even though we had never introduced ourselves. Our hostess disappeared behind the snack counter and started cooking. Before we knew it, she brought us plastic trays heaped with double cheeseburgers, vanilla shakes, and XXL servings of French fries. I was halfway through my burger before I remembered to breathe. Annabeth slurped her shake. Grover picked at the fries and eyed the tray's wax paper liner as if he might go for that, but he still looked too nervous to eat. "What's that hissing noise?" he asked. I listened, but I didn't hear anything. Annabeth shook her head. "Hissing?" Auntie Em asked. "Perhaps you hear the deep fryer oil? You have keen ears, Grover." "I take my vitamins for my ears." "That's admirable," she said. "Please relax." Auntie Em ate nothing. She hadn't taken off her headdress, even to cook, and now she sat forward and interlaced her fingers and watched us eat. It was a little unsettling, having someone stare at me when I couldn't see her face, but I was feeling satisfied after the burger and a little sleepy, and I figured the least I could do was try to make small talk with our hostess. "So, you sell gnomes?" I said, trying to sound interested. "Oh, yes," Auntie Em said. "And animals and people. Anything for the garden. Custom orders. Statuary is very popular, you know." "A lot of business on this road?" "Not so much, no. Since the highway was built, most cars, they do not go this way now. I must cherish every customer I get." My neck tingled, as if somebody else was looking at me. I turned around, but it was just a statue of a young girl holding an Easter basket. The detail was incredible, much better than you see in most garden statues, but something was wrong with her face. It looked as if she were startled, or even terrified. "Ah," Auntie Em said sadly, "you notice some of my creations do not turn out well. They are marred. They do not sell. The face is the hardest to get right. Always the face." "You make these statues yourself?" I asked. "Oh, yes. Once upon a time I had 2 sisters to help me with the business, but they have passed on, and Auntie Em is alone. I only have my statues. This is why I make them, you see. They are my company." The sadness in her voice sounded so deep and so real that I couldn't help feeling sorry for her. Annabeth stopped eating. She sat forward and said, "2 sisters?" "It's a terrible story," Auntie Em said. "Not one for children, really. You see, Annabeth, a bad woman was jealous of me. Long ago, when I was young, I had a boyfriend, you know. And this bad woman was determined to break us apart. She caused a terrible accident. My sisters stayed by me. They shared my bad fortune as long as they could, but eventually they passed on. They faded away. I alone have survived, but at a price. Such a price." I wasn't sure what she meant, but I felt bad for her. My eyelids kept getting heavier, and my full stomach was making me sleepy. Poor old lady, who would want to hurt somebody so nice? "Percy?" Annabeth was shaking me to get my attention. "Maybe we should go. I mean, the ringmaster will be waiting." She sounded tense. I wasn't sure why. Grover was eating the waxed paper off the tray now, but if Auntie Em found that strange, she didn't say anything. "Such beautiful gray eyes," Auntie Em told Annabeth again. My, yes. It has been a long time since I've seen gray eyes like those. She reached out as if to stroke Annabeth's cheek, but Annabeth stood up abruptly. We should really go. Yes! Grover swallowed the wax paper and stood up. The ringmaster is waiting, right? I didn't want to leave. I felt full and content. Auntie Em was so nice. I wanted to stay with her a while. Please, dears, Auntie Em pleaded. I so rarely get to be with children. Before you go, won't you at least sit for a pose? A pose? Annabeth asked warily. A photograph. I will use it to model a new statue set. Children are so popular, you see. Everyone loves children. Annabeth shifted her weight from foot to foot. I don't think we can, ma'am. Come on, Percy. Sure we can, I said. I was irritated with Annabeth for being so bossy, so rude. The old lady just fed us for free. It's just a photo, Annabeth. What's the harm? Yes, Annabeth, the woman purred. No harm. I could tell Annabeth didn't like it, but she allowed Auntie Em to lead us back out to the front door, into the garden of statues. Auntie Em directed us to a park bench next to a stone satyr. Now, she said, I'll just position you correctly. Young girl in the middle, I think. The two young gentlemen on either side. Not much light for a photo, I remarked. Oh, enough, Auntie Em said. Enough for us to see each other, yes? Where's your camera? Grover asked. Auntie Em stepped back, as if to admire the shot. Now, the face is most difficult. Can you smile for me, please? Everyone, a large smile. Grover glanced at the cement satyr next to him and mumbled, That sure does look like Uncle Ferdinand. Grover, Auntie Em chased. Look this way, dear. She still had no camera in her hands. Percy, Annabeth said. Some instinct warned me to listen to Annabeth, but I was fighting this sleepy feeling, the comfortable lull that came from the food and the old lady's voice. I will just be a moment, Auntie Em said. You know I can't see you very well in this cursed veil. Percy, something's wrong, Annabeth insisted. Wrong? Auntie Em said, reaching up to undo the wrap around her head. Not at all, dear. I have such noble company tonight. What could be wrong? This is Uncle Ferdinand, Grover gasped. Look away from her, Annabeth shouted. She whipped her Yankees cap onto her head and vanished. Her invisible hands pushed Grover and me both off the bench. I was on the ground, looking at Auntie Em's sandaled feet. I could hear Grover scrambling off in one direction, Annabeth in another, but I was too dazed to move. Then I heard a strange rasping sound above me. My eyes rose to Auntie Em's hands, which had turned gnarled and warty, with sharp bronze talons for fingernails. I almost looked higher, but somewhere off to my left, Annabeth screamed, No, don't! More rasping, the sound of tiny snakes right above me, from where Auntie Em's head should be. Run! Grover bleated. I heard him racing across the gravel, yelling, Maya! To kickstart his flying sneakers. I couldn't move. I stared at Auntie Em's gnarled claws and tried to fight the groggy trance the old woman had put me in. Such a pity to destroy a handsome young face, she told me soothingly. Stay with me, Percy. All you have to do is look up. I fought the urge to obey. Instead, I looked to one side and saw one of those glass spheres people put in their gardens, a gazing ball. I could see Auntie Em's dark reflection in the orange glass. Her headdress was gone, revealing her face as a shimmering pale circle. Her hair was moving, writhing like serpents. Auntie Em. Auntie Em. How could I have been so stupid? Think, I told myself, how did Medusa die in the myth? But I couldn't think. Something told me that in the myth, Medusa had been asleep when she was attacked by my namesake, Perseus. She wasn't anywhere near asleep now. If she wanted, She could take those talons right now and rake open my face.
"The gray-eyed one did this to me, Percy," Medusa said.
She didn't sound anything like a monster. Her voice invited me to look up, to sympathize with the poor old grandmother.
"Annabeth's mother, the cursed Athena, turned me from a beautiful woman into this."
"Don't listen to her!" Annabeth's voice shouted, somewhere in the statuary.
"Run, Percy!"
"Silence!" and Medusa snarled. Then her voice modulated back to a comforting purr.
"You see why I must destroy the girl, Percy. She is my enemy's daughter. I shall crush her statue to dust, but you, dear Percy, need not suffer."
"No," I muttered. I tried to make my legs move.
"Do you really want to help the gods?" Medusa asked. "Do you understand what awaits you on this foolish quest, Percy? What will happen if you reach the underworld? Do not be a pawn of the Olympians, my dear. You would be better off as a statue. Less pain, less pain."
"Percy!" Behind me, I heard a buzzing sound, like 200-pound hummingbird in a nosedive. Grover yelled, "Duck!" I turned, and there was, in the middle of the night sky, flying from 12 o'clock with winged shoes fluttering, Grover, holding a tree branch the size of a baseball bat. His eyes were shut tight. His head twitched from side to side. He was navigating by ears and nose alone. "Duck!" he yelled again. "I'll get her!" That finally jolted me into action. Knowing Grover, I was sure he'd miss Medusa and nail me. I dove to one side. Thwack! At first, I figured it was the sound of Grover hitting a tree. Then Medusa roared with rage.
"You miserable satyr!" she snarled. "I'll add you to my collection."
"That was for Uncle Ferdinand!" Grover yelled back. I scrambled away and hid in the statuary while Grover swooped down for another pass. Kerwhack! "Ah!" Medusa yelled, her snake hair hissing and spitting. Right next to me, Annabeth's voice said, "Percy!" I jumped so high my feet nearly cleared a garden gnome. "Geez, don't do that!" Annabeth took off her Yankees cap and became visible.
"You have to cut her head off."
"What, are you crazy? Let's get out of here."
"Medusa is a menace. She's evil. I'd kill her myself, but—"
Annabeth swallowed, as if she were about to make a difficult admission.
"But you've got the better weapon. Besides, I'd never get close to her. She'd slice me to bits because of my mother. You've got a chance."
"What? I can't—"
"Look, do you want her turning more innocent people into statues?"
She pointed to a pair of statue lovers, a man and a woman with their arms around each other, turned to stone by the monster. Annabeth grabbed a green gazing ball from a nearby pedestal.
"A polished shield would be better."
She studied the sphere critically.
"The convectivity will cause some distortion. The reflection size should be set off the factor of—"
"Would you speak English?"
"I am."
She tossed me the glass ball.
"Just look at her in the glass. Never look at her directly."
"Hey, guys!" Grover yelled, somewhere above us. "I think she's unconscious." "Rah!" "Maybe not," Grover corrected. He went in for another pass with the tree branch.
"Hurry!" Annabeth told me. "Grover's got a great nose, but eventually he'll crash."
I took out my pen and uncapped it. The bronze blade of Riptide elongated in my hand. I followed the hissing and spitting sounds of Medusa's hair. I kept my eyes locked on the gazing ball so that I would only glimpse Medusa's reflection, but not the real thing. Then, in the green-tinted glass, I saw her. Grover was coming in for another turn at bat, but this time he flew a little too low. Medusa grabbed the stick and pulled him off course. He tumbled through the air and crashed into the arms of a stone grizzly bear with a painful "Ugh!" Medusa was about to lunge at him when I yelled, "Hey!" I advanced on her, which wasn't easy, holding a sword and a glass ball. If she charged, I'd have a hard time defending myself. But then she let me approach. 20 feet, 10 feet. I could see the reflection of her face now. Surely she wasn't really that ugly. The green swirls of the gazing ball must be distorting it, making it look worse.
"You wouldn't harm a old woman, Percy?" she crooned. "I know you wouldn't." I hesitated, fascinated by the face I saw reflecting in the glass, the eyes that seemed to burn straight through the green tint, making my arms go weak. From a cement grizzly, Grover moaned, "Percy, don't listen to her!" Medusa cackled. "Too late!" She lunged at me with her talons. I slashed up with my sword, heard a sickening slop, then hissed like wind rushing out of a cavern, the sound of a monster disintegrating. Something fell on the ground next to my foot. It took all of my willpower not to look. I could feel the warm ooze soaking into my sock, little dying snakeheads tugging at my shoelaces. "Oh, yuck," Grover said. His eyes were still tightly closed, but I guessed he could hear the thing gurgling and steaming. "Mega yuck." Annabeth came up next to me, her eyes fixed on the sky. She was holding Medusa's black veil. She said, "Don't move." Very, very carefully, without looking down, she knelt and draped the monster's head in the black cloth, then picked it up. It was still dripping green juice. "You okay?" she asked me, her voice trembling. "Yeah." I decided, though, I felt like throwing up my double cheeseburger. Why didn't the head evaporate? "Once you sever it, it becomes a spoil of war," she said. "Same as your minotaur horn, but don't unwrap the head. It can still petrify you." Grover moaned as he climbed down from the grizzly statue. He had a big welt on his forehead. The green Rasta cap hung from one of his little goat horns, and his fake feet had been knocked off his hooves. The magic sneakers were flying aimlessly around his head. "The Red Baron," I said. "Good job, man." He managed a bashful grin. "That really was not fun, though. Well, the hitting her with a stick part, that was fun. But crashing into a concrete bear, not fun." We snatched his shoes out of the air. I recapped my sword. Together, the three of us stumbled back into the warehouse. We found some old plastic grocery bags behind the snack counter and double-wrapped Medusa's head. We plopped it on the table where we'd eaten dinner and sat around it, too exhausted to speak. Finally, I said, "So we have Athena to thank for this monster?" Annabeth flashed me an irritated look. "Your dad, actually. Don't you remember? Medusa was Poseidon's girlfriend. They decided to meet in my mother's temple. That's why Athena turned her into a monster. Medusa and her two sisters who had helped her get into the temple. They became the three Gorgons. That's why Medusa wanted to slice me up. But she wanted to preserve you as a nice statue. She's still sweet on your dad. You probably reminded her of him." My face was burning. "Oh, so now it's my fault we met Medusa?" Annabeth straightened. In a bad imitation of my voice, she said, "It's just a photo, Annabeth. What's the harm?" "Forget it," I said. "You're impossible." "You're insufferable." "Hey!" Grover interrupted. "You two are giving me a migraine, and satyrs don't even get migraines. What are we going to do with this head?" I stared at the thing. One little snake was hanging out of the hole in the plastic. The words printed on the side of the bag said, "We appreciate your business." I was angry, not just with Annabeth or her mom, but with all the gods for this whole quest, for getting us blown off the road in 2 major fights on my very first day out from camp. At this rate, we'd never make it to LA alive, much less before the summer solstice. What had Medusa said? "Don't be a pawn of the Olympians, my dear. You would be better off as a statue." I got up. "I'll be back." "Percy," Annabeth called after me, "what are you—" I searched the back of the warehouse until I found Medusa's office. Her account book showed her 6 most recent sales, all shipments to the underworld to decorate Hades and Persephone's garden. According to the one freight bill, the underworld's billing address was DOA Recording Studios, West Hollywood, California. I folded up the bill and stuffed it into my pocket. In the cash register, I found $20, a few golden drachmas, and some packing slips for Hermes Overnight Express, each with a little leather bag attached for coins. I rummaged around the rest of the office until I found the right size box. I went back to the picnic table, packed up Medusa's head, and filled out the delivery slip. The Gods, Mount Olympus, 600th floor, Empire State Building, New York,
New York. With best wishes, Percy Jackson. They are not gonna like that. They'll think you're impertinent, Grover warned. I poured some golden drachmas into the pouch. As soon as I closed it, there was a sound like a cash register. The package floated off the table and disappeared with a pop. I am impertinent, I said. I looked at Annabeth, daring her to criticize. She didn't. She seemed resigned to the fact that I had major talent for ticking off the gods. Come on, she muttered. We need a new plan. All right, that was chapter 11. We visit the Garden Gnome Emporium. Medusa sounds really scary. Let's discuss some of the things that happened in this chapter. So at the beginning of the chapter, why is Annabeth so upset with Percy for risking his life on the bus? She is upset with him because he's kind of the main person in this quest, right? It has to continue. He needs to help them. But also, she kind of is using this for her own gain too, because she never gets to leave camp. And if he died, then the quest would be over, and she'd have to go back to camp. What does Auntie M look like when she opens the door of her Garden Gnome Emporium? Do you remember what she looks like? I found the picture, I'll show you. She is covered from head to toe in robes and a veil. So all they can see is her hands and kind of her eyes, but not totally, because they're covered up too. Why does Grover start getting nervous in this place, in the Garden Gnome Emporium? Well, there's a lot of reasons. The first thing, he sees a statue that looks awfully like his Uncle Ferdinand. Ugh. And then he keeps smelling monsters, but he doesn't see any monsters yet, so he thinks they need to get out. And he just has a really bad feeling. How can you tell that Percy isn't really thinking straight after his meal? Well, there's a lot of warning signs. Auntie M knows all of their names somehow. She gave them so much food for free. She's being really nice. And there's a lot of strange things about those statues. And Percy just keeps thinking, this is just a sweet old lady. Ugh. Also, his instincts are telling him to run, but his body's like, How could we have guessed Auntie M's true identity before Percy did? So, there are lots of different famous Greek myths. Remember, we talked about Greek myths. There's stories and things that have happened that they're not really happened. Let's do that again. We've talked about some Greek myths. So they are stories that were told a long time ago about heroes, about gods, to kind of explain how the weather works and how the world works and all of their complicated lives. Also about monsters. A very famous monster is called Medusa. Do you remember any things that Medusa can do before we really get into it? So, she can look you in the eyes and you turn to stone. Ooh. So that would explain all of the very realistic looking stone statues, wouldn't it? Also, her hair is made of snakes. Ooh. And Grover could hear a hissing sound the whole time. She didn't particularly like Annabeth because Athena was the one who turned her into this hideous monster. Are you ready for this hideous monster? Medusa. Don't look at her eyes. So why does Annabeth say they have to kill Medusa rather than just run away and get out? Well, it's not like she's sitting idle, right? She has a whole warehouse full of stone statues. It means people that she's turned to stone. And so they can't just leave her because she might hurt more innocent people. When Percy finally defeats Medusa, her head remains. Ew. Why do you think it remained but the rest of her left? Has anybody heard any of those stories? In the myth, you could still turn people to stone just with her head. Ew. While Percy was looking through Medusa's office, he found some very important information. Do you remember what it is? It's the address to the underworld. It's in California. So they have a really long way to go if they're in New Jersey. We're going to look at a map next time to kind of plot out exactly where our heroes have stopped. All right. The last thing Percy does is he sends the head of Medusa to the gods. So he puts it in a box and sends it up there. Why do you think he does that? Well, as he said, he's impertinent, which means that he is kind of obstinate and he doesn't always follow the rules. He doesn't want to be controlled by them. He's going to help them, but do it his own way. And this is his proof of doing that. All right, that is the end of our discussion of chapter 11. We will see you next time for another chapter of Percy Jackson and the Olympians, the Lightning Thief. Bye, everyone.